Hi, Faye.
Thanks
Hi.
for coming on and chatting to us and our audience about the Rapid project that we're involved in together. So I guess
How it started was about a couple of months ago in the last year.
So hang on, Faye, everybody. Faye is from the University of Newcastle. She is our collaborator, or we are your collaborator on this project.
Hello, and it's lovely to be with you. I've been following sort of some of your posts over the last couple of weeks, so I've been enjoying seeing what you've been doing. So it's nice to talk about our Rapid project here as well. So how will we start?
Well, let's start by how we came together, I suppose. So the Rapid project is like for about a $10,000 grant
at the Newcastle University.
Yeah, with the School of Creative Industries.
Yes.
To come up with an idea that tries to solve a question, a current world problem or situation. Yeah, talk about that.
I found it lovely, just a lovely crossover when I think you and I started to talk, Ro, and you were just so incredibly well informed about all of these questions I had around the fashion industry and sustainable fashion. And to me, it was an absolute no-brainer that we should try and do some project that would be useful and forward-focused. And this offers, the Rapid grant through the School of Creative Industries offers like enough money for you to have a start of something, I guess, to test the ground without having, it's not a sort of a huge amount of money that you need to have the whole project scheduled for. It's a way to sort of test an idea. I thought after speaking to you, there were hundreds of different ideas that you could potentially think about, because I think between the three of you at High Tea with Mrs. Woo, you've actually thought about so many interesting facets of the fashion industry and the local fashion industry as well. And to me, that was just such a wonderful thing to be involved with. And of course, when I spoke to some of my colleagues as well, we're also very keen to be involved with it. So we've also got Bernadette Drabsch, Kaylee Brooker, obviously, and Giselle Penn,
bring such
are all on board
perspectives and skills, you know. And it's for us, this is fantastic, because we usually have to, we don't get the chances to dedicate a chunk of time to develop an idea in this way. So
and to work with people who are really expert in their field as well, and to be able to bring all those ideas together in one and achieve something, which we have.
So it is stalled at the moment because of the but I thought we should share with everyone our pitch and where we've gotten to with it. So
okay, so would you like me to share our PowerPoint then with you?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Okay, cool. So
hoping that this will go, yes, full screen. So can you see that okay?
Yeah.
So this was actually the title of our original pitch. It was Low Waste, Slow Fashion Future, which was a great title. I remember that we were deliberating for ages and we had to get our bid in. And I think one of you come up with that at the last minute, and I thought, oh, that's brilliant.
It was like 11:30 at night or something.
Yeah, it was. And I had to get it changed. We'd already put the submission in, and I managed to get it changed because it was such a better title. And this is just a little bit of info from our pitch. So we had 5 minutes to pitch our idea to a panel, which we did quite well. It was a lot of fast talking in there.
Yeah, like we'd never been in a Shark Tank before. You were so good.
So, you know, the thing that I think that we wanted to present the basic problem that we were looking at. And so we were thinking about how much clothing people purchase and how much more it is than just even 30 years ago, and how much waste is implicit in that kind of making of stuff that we don't really need. This little list of comments about why we're doing that, you know, about seasonal fashion, about getting bored, about sort of putting on weight and not fitting your clothing properly anymore, being impulsive, you know, liking the colour of something and having to have it. That happens to be with a particular tone of green. You know, that cheap clothing then breaks easily, and we don't know how to mend it anymore. So these were problems that I think we identified.
Yes, that's right. So looked at how we can try and solve this with technology, perhaps, and design. Yeah, so basically, you know, we came across the sort of the term "waste is a design flaw," and we thought, gosh, that is so true. You know, when we, as designers, and when we studied design, you didn't get taught, didn't really consider the life cycle of a design, or you know, the fact that the end, what happens to the end, or what happens to the waste products.
So you tend to kind of get given a design brief, and you're going to solve this problem, and then you just design for that. But you don't think about the entire process right up until the end. What happens to it at the end of its life? And I think that thinking about waste as a design flaw really changes the way that you design something.
Yeah, and the proposition is to not just keep designing new, but to redesign. So, you know, we have clothes. So there's not really that much more to it, but we have to redesign the way we think about it, the way that we produce it, and then what happens to it at the end. We came up with, like, we were doing already some zero waste garments where we would cut the fabric roll to the maximum, where there would be zero waste. Everything was put back into the design itself, and the wearer ends up wearing it. Like all the off cuts and everything is sort of designed into the garment. And so the picture here shows how like a normal a normal pattern might be placed and cut on a piece of fabric, and then the zero waste is where it's completely used up. So this was a really great example of what we were trying to explain to the audience at the pitch.
Yeah, look, and I think the more I looked into it and the types of things that people were making with zero waste patterns, I was amazed by how clever this is. You know, like it's actually like doing some kind of very complicated puzzle about how these pieces can go together. You know, I'm sort of amazed at how this can happen and how the fabric can drape beautifully as well. And I think that's about the choices of fabric that you use, because there's a risk of these pieces looking really boxy.
Yes, that's right.
And somehow I was also impressed by your choice of fabrics in that kind of conversation, because I think that changes that aspect of the garment as well. Also the use of the word garment. I can remember this lovely moment where one of you said, like, I'm not sure even which one it was anymore, but somebody said garment and not, you know, like as a sort of generic term. And it opened up all these possibilities for each piece that I thought was really wonderful.
Yeah, and for the idea of it being, we did also have that discussion about it being ungendered, or there's a lot of conversation around that, about somebody going to a garment rather than the garment being gendered. A garment doesn't have a gender, you know, it's what we put onto it. So,
but culturally and society has done that. Like, this is a female garment, this is a male garment. I think there's a lot more people wanting to challenge that.
Yeah, actually been, like, before our project together, you've been doing this for quite some time, and that idea of adaptable garments that, you know, like men or women could wear, and it would sort of just fit on them differently, but it would suit them, you know, implicitly. And I think there was a lovely moment, and perhaps you've got one of these garments there to show a little bit later, where as a group we all basically tried on, you know, the garments and it was really fun because they looked good on everyone, you know.
It's a great photo. So fun.
So fun. All different body shapes, all different heights, and then male and female. It was really fascinating too.
I've got a picture of zero waste in this. Was really interesting, and you know, and it's challenging to do that. And also then I think the other thing that you were looking at were size options. So, you know, I guess something that is adaptable in sizing is really interesting too for people that are a bit bigger or whose shape is changing. You know, this was then the printer option that we come up with, because I think that the digital printing then was a big part of our project, and maybe the thing that differentiates it from the work that you were already doing anyway, and brings our collaboration probably more into focus. So, you know, the digital printer and the idea that so much wastewater is used in printing fabric for fashion normally. But with digital printing, you're only actually using ink on the absolute place where you need it. And so, you know, that completely cuts all of the dyeing processes and down to an absolute minimum, but also the water waste. So with our grant money then from the Rapid Grant, looking at what kind of digital printer we could buy become the thing. And this is where we're sort of stalled at the moment. It'll be the next exciting phase.
Yeah, that's right. So
Yes.
what's cool about this particular printer that we purchased is the fact that we can literally feed different kinds of fabrics. You know, so a lot of digital printers, you have to kind of pre-prepare fabrics, either with a coating or there's got to be a certain finish to it. Whereas we like the exciting idea of maybe even, you know, assembling fabrics or putting
End rolls
together and feeding it through. It's almost like a paper printing machine that, you know, can obviously take different weights of fabric.
Yeah, look, I think that flexibility is really exciting. I love the fact that we could put in sort of the scrap bits that we've all got that may already be patterned and come out with something completely different that's refreshed.
That's right. That was one of the ideas, wasn't it? And then
Yeah.
I guess the other exciting part about this printer was the fact that we could play around with it spontaneously, and that we could, the main experiment was to be able to print very specifically the surface design and the pattern together, and so that when we cut out the pieces,
and they're pieced back together.
It can be absolutely seamless almost. Like the print, the surface design will be continuous across the garment.
Yeah, look, I think that was one of the most exciting things. And I think that you first mentioned it, Angela, and like after thinking about that, I mean, not only are we using the ink only where we need it, but we are able to make an all-over pattern on something, really. I think the next image we look at then here was about how we start to separate the pattern fabric out and just print on the piece that we need, and how it's no longer
all over.
Yeah, again, it could go all over the garment. So to me, I think for our project, this is one of the most exciting things to test.
That's right. It's not wasting the ink. It's only to those pieces that we need, and then marrying this this process with a low to zero waste pattern where everything gets used up, and maybe we could even experiment with laying 2 or more garments, you know, on an area to really maximize, and then starting to think about how those things are designed together. There's so much into it that we really just haven't. We just started.
I know, it's just the beginning. It's just
yeah, but that is going to be exciting, because I've also thought about how we can use colour in that, and how you could just make one panel a part of the colour and it could exactly match a colour in the other panel, and we can actually create the garment so freely with this in mind, and adapt the pattern as well by sort of enlarging it or shrinking it digitally. So, you know, there's all of this scope. It's quite complex though. Like
once when we were doing this project, we started talking about, oh gosh, we could do anything. But then really it started to make us feel like, well, you kind of have to think about the longevity. For us, it's always been like, well, you could do something really great and crazy, but you know, if it's just sort of the moment, it kind of is the same issue.
Yeah, so, it is.
It is. So it's thinking about the longevity of the design, the print, its meanings, you know, and that's how we came into talking about the 6 seasons.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
And how in the fashion industry, you know, it's 4 seasons, right? It's autumn, winter, spring, summer, and in Australia too, where it's not as
Not as distinct as in a lot of other countries, the 4 seasons.
Yeah, and then we realized that, you know, in this country,
In the indigenous
in
culture.
the indigenous culture, they kind of celebrate seasons kind of moving from one to the other, and there are generally about 6 distinct seasons. And when we discovered that, we thought, wow, that is so crazy that we have absolutely no connection with that. Like, it's such a European based system that we, you know, it has no like the autumn, winter, spring, summer thing has no relevance to us here in Australia. And so that really brought up a lot of questions for us, and the way that we look at wear garments across the seasons,
and how you layer them, and how you wear and mix and match, and how that's set in your wardrobe becomes really flexible and fluid over the course of a year and years.
But we were also talking about, you know, just designing for the climate that you live in. And I think another observation was that you know, English garments were very tailored, and it's not necessarily suitable for the Australian climate, but we've still somehow instigated that. So we were looking at other cultures and how garments are worn.
Yeah, so you're right. As we progress into this project, it kind of
Got deeper.
It got deeper, and there became more questions. So we've got a lot of work to do in that space.
No, this could just go on and on. There were so many lovely things to try out that are all heading in the right direction, you know. And I guess the greatest wish would be that, you know, we come up with something that can be taken up by different groups and that generates a new feeling about the very basic part of designing and fabric design as well. I'll move on to our next image. This was then one that you put together that also looked at this this sort of gender differentiation or not in clothing. And I love this because, you know, you can see that this is the same outfit that works so wonderfully on these two people. And then we were looking at what kinds of designs, I guess, we could use as well. So that was kind of lovely to play with that. And I think Brett's mark making come into this stage of things as well.
That's right. So we started sketching some sort of ungendered sort of style ideas, like garment ideas, like pants, top that function in different ways, and
pretty much in a zero waste approach, and how you use the other pieces that you're technically wouldn't normally use in a normal pattern cutting system. You could adapt those pieces back into the garment, and how would it look and how would it fit, and how would you have a size range, and how would you have you know, different heights and male and female.
The pants, you know, you'd have these negative spaces. It's like, oh well, what do you do with those? And can we think about how that works for a wearable item? So it's been really fun, you know, and it's changing the way that we look at how we design, you know, on like in terms of on a piece of fabric that we would cut.
But also the fabric choices there were interesting too, because you look at an incredible amount of fabrics before you actually decide on which ones to use. And I think I found that just looking at the possibilities with you was really interesting to me, because it just showed me how careful you are in selecting these beautiful fabrics for your ranges, you know, that it's such a considered process, I suppose.
That's right. We were looking at just we were talking about, you know, the low water usage in the printing process, and you know, in the world of fabrics and sustainable fabrics and the transparent supply chain of creating fabric and sourcing, it's just so much in it. So we thought, okay, we definitely look at natural fibers, because you know, you don't really want your fabrics to outlast civilization. You know, you things need to age, and that's a natural process. So natural fibers for us is very important. But then looking at, you know, like say fabrics like hemp. Hemp, you know, is becoming more and more available. It is a really fantastic fiber.
Very low water use.
Very low water usage. Yeah, so fabrics that are you know, that if you want to achieve different things, like say we want to use a very fine cotton voile because we want some sort of transparency or layering effect. But then you have to think about the cotton and whether it's organic and whether it's how it's grown, where it's grown. So that, you know, thinking every step through is a lot of work. So I think we try to simplify it by going, okay, what's something that we can source that is as local as possible or as sustainable as possible that we can, you know, do with this experiment. So,
yeah, but it also interested me that when we were talking about it, even the thread that's used in constructing the garments is part of that conversation, because often polyester threads are used, and the idea of, you know, what sort of threads could be used to even sew them together. So, you know, I was very impressed by how every aspect of this was considered, and how you'd also considered the breakdown of the garment, like after its life has passed, more or less, that it could return to the earth, more or less. You know, that was sort of a really interesting part of that.
Yeah, and that we'd love that to just be normal for everyone in the future. I think for us too, like we always just thought about the longevity of a garment, and you know, if you look at, you know, we buy a lot of vintage clothing too. It's like something could last for a few generations.
So you see those beautiful 1920s jackets with beautifully made, incredible wools, and it's still in great conditions. This, you know, almost 100 years.
Yes,
that's right. So it's thinking about that, and well, it's built to last. But we've always kind of stopped there too. You know, we haven't kind of gone, okay, what's going to happen in 500 years time? You know, if it lasts that long, or from it, like just lots of wear, because our customers tell us they wear the clothes to death.
Yeah.
And
so what happens at death? You know, where does it go?
Yeah. So it's difficult to source to kind of create a garment that decomposes completely, like, you know, even the natural threads and everything. And because of the costs, like it's quite inhibiting, you know, to overlock a garment, you know, you're using quite a lot of thread. And, you know, a reel of
tensile thread's
like, I know, $50 a reel, whereas a general thread that you're using these days, like $2. Like,
yeah,
the cost is for the customer, so we have to
balance that out.
Yeah, balance it out, and then we think about the way that we flat seam everything instead of overlocking. So it's designed less thread usage and less pieces perhaps, and so it starts to limit everything. So then you kind of go, well, you can't make a box to wear, so you have to find different approaches. So
designing garments, it is like doing a puzzle, and it's a strange sort of 2D to 3D thinking, I've always thought. You know, that you're taking something flat and making it three-dimensional on a body. It's actually really challenging to do that.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to our next image then, which was about the designs, I guess, that Brett originally come up with for our project.
Right.
Thinking about fabric design. And, you know, they're mostly based in mark making, and somehow they relate to the landscape to me as well. You know, and they're very gestural. But I think that Brett provided us then with a whole range of different works that we could then adapt into our pattern pieces and flip over and change the colours on. And that's also part of the process that I'm really looking forward to, I think.
Yeah, I think when we thought about surface design, you know, and we really love very iconic kind of descriptions of, like, say, flowers or you know, checks, but when we thought about this and we thought, okay, we're designing something that we want the longevity of it, not just that it's a really floral print, but it speaks about place, and it speaks about like you say, landscape and story and movement. With Brett's work, it was really easy to look at these beautiful ink marks and go, okay, we can pull parts of it out, or there's, you know, small details that we can blow up, and, you know, that take over a certain part of a garment. It was really fun just to explore that and change the way that we think about pattern. It becomes more like a surface shape I suppose.
Yeah, no, and I think everybody had slightly different takes on different designs as well. And it was interesting to work on that as a group.
Mm.
And, you know, I think how Kaylee was approaching that as well was really interesting for me. Like that you know, you could flip it out and put different colors in it, and just all of the things that you could do digitally to alter these basic designs, but keep a cohesive group of garments together. You know, that was a whole other thing to think about. I think
That was another layer.
it is another layer, but you know, this project just generates so many wonderful things to investigate, I suppose. You know, there aren't enough hours in the day for this. This was a bit of a, well, from one of our meetings really, to start with, where I think that Kaylee had sort of dropped in some of the patterns. Here you can see that, where, you know, she's been trying out different brush strokes and how they could meet up on
With colour as well.
garments. Yeah, and sort of just pasting them together for us to have a look at. And, you know, to me that was fascinating. And I think that might have been the first time we started to try on this jacket.
That's right, we did. And then, you know, then trying it on, doing that photo shoot where everybody wore the same set of garments, and how it, you know, it's styled, it fits.
I've got a picture of that here.
Yeah, that's it. So that was really awesome to see, you know, like such different body shapes and heights and
skin tones.
Yeah, and how, you know, how you carry yourself in a particular set of garments.
So this is exactly the same, set of garments, pants, top, and kind of trench jacket, as well as a scarf. It's absolutely fascinating to see.
It was very cool, yeah. And so we're really looking forward to, you know, taking this idea and making it happen in the very near future.
I'll turn this PowerPoint off here because, and like maybe you've got one of the garments to show there, Ro.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Actually, here's the top. This is kind of, because we didn't really have time to go to sort of develop new patterns as such. We kind of worked on this project with patterns that were already existing in our repertoire. So this one was like this one side top that used up all the fabric.
But there was probably like a very small amount of it that wasn't, so it wasn't completely zero, it was more like a low waist. So then we just reworked the pattern to make it zero waist. So there's a seam line here where there didn't used to be one, but we're able to tessellate the patterns and pieces a lot better.
And then we made like a piece in the collar where we stuffed just that little tiny bit of fabric offcut we had left to make a neck padding at the back. So
I love that.
Literally zero waist.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, this top that we make in our range already, you know, has these extendable sleeves. So it was awesome to see it on Brett, and then on Kaylee, and then on Jill, and on your daughter too. You know, when we had Millie come in, try it on, it was so nice to see how it worked
across the sizes.
So
that's a beautiful organic cotton, really soft that we saw. So they're very thin stripe, and that just seemed to work across lots of different you know, skin tones, and it's just really lovely and comfortable to wear.
It feels beautiful on.
And then this was the pants. So these pants were this idea of you know, where you generally, like from the picture that we showed earlier, where you'd have the bits cut out to make the pants, and then what do you do with that negative space, the pieces that you've cut out? Usually, you know, we might cut a wallet out of it or something, and keep and use it till there's a very small piece left. But with this it was designed into the pocket instead. So those sort of shapes that are cut out are now attached to the pocket, and it became a double pocket. So
it's fabulous.
And there's two sets of pockets
because you've got the top section from the waist to the crotch as the pattern, the negative piece, and you've also got the hem to the crotch as the negative piece. So you've got two sets of different shapes and different lengths. So that was really fascinating. Also, to work out what size do you make it that would fit across different people, or maybe that we would be able to size the pants by not adjusting necessarily the pattern, but adjusting the elastic, and that would give you that flexibility of being able to do, say, 5 sizes.
Yeah, so that we didn't go much further with that because obviously there is like
A lot of material,
a lot of fabric. So
fabric.
like for Ange, when she puts it on, it's like a lot more voluminous. Whereas with Brett putting it on, it wasn't. It was actually fine.
Yeah.
So I think it's, even though it's easier to kind of do a one size garment. Obviously,
there's challenges there too,
yeah.
And whether or not in that digital printing option, maybe we're able to kind of go, well, we can size that garment down, and then on the side of the fabric, you can then piece another design or another garment idea, and then we're not wasting it. So it's still kind of low to zero waste, but it might not be just one garment. It might be then 1.5 or 2 garments.
Because realistically, we can't make one garment to fit like that, such a broad range.
No, I was amazed actually at how those garments did work on so many people, because I thought that they would just swim, but actually the fabrics were so beautiful and drapey that it didn't give that impression at all. It was sort of comfortable. It didn't feel like you had too much bulk, but it was generous in fabric, because one thing with cheap designs, people skimp on fabric as well. So there's this nice moment where it's enough. It's not sort of skimping. It's not too much. It's not too voluminous, because it's also light. I don't know.
Yeah. So definitely there's lots to consider there. And in terms of making a range of garments and how they get worn across the different times of year, like the top being light enough for summer, but it's,
it can be layered for
that's right. So there's definitely a lot of things that we can delve into, and for sure this is like a proposition for us too, moving forward as designers.
Look at the title, Low Waste, Low Fashion Future. Essentially, like we were trying to make a proposition for the future, but the future is here. The future is now. And with COVID-19, it's really fast track that, because the reality of all of this is that all these garment workers that have been making in these factories all over the world have pretty much just been abandoned.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Orders from brands big and small who have just cancelled. And there's millions, billions of dollars of garments already made that now have been cancelled.
Yeah. So as part of like this week, marking Fashion Revolution and that conversation, we thought that's why we wanted to talk about this, because the proposition that we were, discussing anyway, but now it's like, well, gosh, really this period of time is showing how it's unsustainable, how bad that really is, and how if this is a time that we can make these changes, then what do we do about that? How do we go about it?
How do we design for this new world, this new future, and how do we sort of almost localize some level of production too, because that's become quite apparent, like with all of the surgical masks and gowns and all the equipment that isn't produced locally, and suddenly you don't have supply.
It's so far-reaching, and just talking about the amount of waste in a season-generated fashion industry where you miss the season and that has no currency anymore. It's kind of shocking, isn't it? When you think of all of the garments that just won't have any currency for anybody, that they won't, they are waste basically. And
we all have a part to play in making these changing this. So it's good. It's really great that we can talk about it and get enthusiastic about doing it.
Yeah.
So
and hopefully we'll work on this, continue to keep working on this with you all, and come up with some solutions and get this digital printer happening.
No, it's going to be so exciting, and I think just finding a way that we can do that is really great. I've so enjoyed working with you too.
It's not over yet.
No, it's not.
It's just
a on for years.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Thanks, Faye.
Thank you,
That
Faye.
was great.
Talk to you. All right.
So cool.
Okay, we'll stop here.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.